Hello everyone, and welcome back if you are new here. This week we have a little week in the studio vlog style video where I am going to be going through all of these watercolor paintings that are incomplete and finishing up as many of them as I can, adding details where needed and all of that sort of thing. So thanks for stopping by to check out this video, and I hope you enjoy watching. First up is a quick look at the supplies I will be using. I have a kneaded eraser, my Arteza watercolors on the left, and on the right is Artistro watercolors, and then I have a few water brushes which hold the water in their barrels, as well as these collapsible paintbrushes for travel. I like these for details usually. I also have my Artex acrylic markers, and on these I have them in the bag organized by my favorite colors, so the colors I use more, the caps face towards the left, and the ones facing towards the right are the colors I use less. I also have my Arteza gouache and their swatches, and a few other products. These are acrylic and watercolor inks. Some are iridescent like this light blue, so they have shimmers in them, which makes really cool effects. And then I also have a couple that are watercolor ink, so there's just a few different brands and styles of those. And I typically use this palette for mixing those colors. The first canvas that I want to work on is this one. I tried to paint in the similar style as when I'm using my markers and pencils, and I didn't really like the way it turned out, so I'm just going to try to add some more details and textures and see how I feel about it after that. I didn't really have a plan going into any of these, and especially this one, I already knew that I didn't like it, so I wasn't really sure how I would save it, so I just added some flowers, more texture to the grass, and then I ended up going in later and using my colored pencils to add even more texture, just because I typically use colored pencil textures on this style. I don't know if I really like it much better, but it does look more complete now. This was also the very beginning of this process of fixing all of these paintings that I just abandoned, so for the very first one, I don't think it turned out too badly. These canvases were from a collection that I was going to do with a swirly monochrome background, and then I was also going to include monochrome plant-related paintings in the foreground on these, just so it would kind of be a little more abstract and have interesting textures. But I ended up having a hard time with these with the other colors. I don't really use orange and yellow very often, so I didn't really know what to include on them, and at first I didn't want to just include a bunch of flowers on all of these different canvases, but then I figured why not? It will make them be a little bit more of a matching collection instead of only the backgrounds being similar. And this yellow one I was definitely having the hardest time with, and I ended up just taking off all of this paint. It was originally going to be trees, and I didn't like how it was turning out, so I just took off all the paint, and then I'm actually going to turn it into flowers, and I'm going to use more than just that one shade of yellow on these, just because I think limiting it to one color was a little bit too limiting, and I was having a hard time making it look the way that I wanted it to while using just one or two colors, so I decided to allow myself to use more colors if I needed to, and I think it really improved, especially this painting. I do get asked a little bit more often than I expected if I have any watercoloring tips or if I teach or questions along those lines, so I thought in this video I would share a few of my thoughts and approaches to watercolor just in case that's something that you're interested in. So one of the biggest things with watercolor, I think, is you have to be okay with it not being perfect, so you can control where it goes a little bit, but like you can see on these stems, it was bleeding a little bit, and you have to be okay with that if the water moves and works in ways that you weren't originally planning on. and it's okay if that happens, and you just kind of have to work with it. You can't be too controlling, and you can't really force it to work exactly how you want it to, and I think that's one of the fun things about watercolor. You can see it here on these two. The paint was a little bit wet, so it bled together, and it can create new interesting textures and colors, even if that's maybe not what you planned for. When you just allow that and you just work with it instead of trying to fight it, it can really make your paintings a lot more interesting. Obviously, adding splatters is an extreme version of that, but that is also a fun way to add extra textures. I wasn't really thinking about it as I was working on these paintings, but I did notice while editing this footage, I think a lot of why I didn't like these paintings is most of them were not vibrant and bright enough, and I noticed that's most of what I added back in is even more color than I had originally put. So don't be afraid to use a lot of color. I know a lot of people say that watercolor is very transparent and it's lighter and all of those things, but you definitely can use a lot of color and you can have a lot of very vibrant colors in your paintings. You can also add details by using less water, so I do add quite a bit of detail in mine, even though I just said you just kind of let the water do what it wants to. At the same time, if you use less water, you can add a lot of detail. For this painting, I thought I just needed a little bit of extra white, so I used my acrylic paint marker to add white onto the buildings, and then I blended it out a little bit with a wet paintbrush, but I still wasn't getting the look that I was hoping for, so I ended up digging out some of my micron fine liners and using those to outline the buildings to add a little bit of extra contrast, and I think that really helped with the look I was going for. And then I used it to add a little bit of texture here and there. And overall, I think that really improved this painting and made it look more like I was envisioning it when I was sketching it. Seeing that it was surprisingly easy to fix this painting after I just figured out what exactly I wanted to do, even if it wasn't quite what I originally expected, really helped me kind of get into more of a mood for finishing these paintings, because at first I hadn't really been sure what I was going to do or what approach I should take with finishing these, so realizing that it really was a little bit easier than I had expected to make this a painting that I actually did like kind of helped set the mood for the rest of them this week and make it a little bit easier to finish them. Up next we have this one, which was a small version of a large painting that I made this past November and December, and I was going to make a little version kind of as a test run and get an idea of what I wanted to do, but I got bored really fast and just wanted to work on the actual large painting, so this one got abandoned and then I just never came back to it. So this one was pretty simple. I already basically knew what I was going to do. After taking a break from painting on Monday, on Tuesday I went back to this painting and just finished it up by adding all of the final details. For these paintings, I try not to think about them too much, and I just add different lines and circles, squiggles, a few little rainbows with decorations in them, really just focusing a lot on patterns and textures, some florals here and there. Here I grabbed some of my old paintings in this style to kind of get an idea of what else to add, which made me realize I didn't add any of the golden browns and yellows that I typically do, so I added those in, and then I added just a few more decorations and more texture. This style of painting is a lot of fun because even more than my normal styles, these are paintings that I can really just relax and enjoy the process of creating them and not really have to think too much about what I'm doing or worry about how it's going to turn out, because they're just random abstract patterns and they don't need to be perfect, and these are a great activity to just relax, have a lot of fun, and really just enjoy the process of creating and not really get too worried about how it's going to turn out or any of those things. So I highly recommend making these paintings. All you do is you just put colorful circles all over the page or the canvas, and then you can use an ink pen, a paint pen, any of those things, and just add a bunch of different lines, dots, squiggles, all kinds of different textures to just fill in the extra space around those circles or to fill in the circles themselves. For this painting, I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to change anything, and I ended up deciding just to make the background a little bit of a brighter blue and add a little bit more color to it. And I think I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, just with that slight addition and a few splatters here and there. Nothing really too crazy. This next painting is another one where I realized that I just needed to use more color than I thought I did. Obviously I hadn't painted the background at all, so I put a light blue wash over the entire background using a wet on wet technique, which is where you use a wet brush and you put water all over the canvas or the paper, and then you also use very watery, runny watercolor paint, and you use that water that's already on the canvas to help spread out the colorful paint that you have on your brush. Usually that makes it a little bit lighter, but it also helps it blend a little bit more seamlessly and smoothly, which originally is what I thought I wanted for the background, but then I realized that it wasn't bright enough to really show up as well as I wanted, in contrast to how bright the colors were of the flowers. So I ended up adding even more blue to the background in a little while. And then overall, for the rest of this painting, I just added some more contrast on the stems and leaves, and the dark parts on them kind of stuck out a little bit, so I just blended those a little bit more. Here you can see me adding more blue to the background, and I'll do even more in a minute. And then I also added a brownish red to the flowers, just because in real life I felt like they were leaning a little bit more of a bright pink instead of the red that I was looking for. So this one wasn't really anything big, basically just adding a little bit more texture and a little bit more color, just to make all the colors be more towards the direction that I wanted them. I also decided that this was feeling a little bit empty, so I added a few different shades of green at the bottom to be grass and other plants, just to add a little bit of grounding for these flowers so they didn't look like they were just coming up out of nowhere. Using multiple colors allowed me to add some layering and depth and not make it look quite as flat. So that's always something you can do as well if you feel like your painting of nature is looking a little bit flat, is add a little bit more of a contrast in the colors, and that can help add depth, just like with any other kind of painting or drawing. But with watercolor, sometimes it's easier to work, well, often it is easier to work from light colors to dark colors, just because obviously it's hard to cover a dark color using a light color with watercolor. So definitely lighter shades first and then darker shades, that way you can layer them without it just turning into a big mess. If you have made it this far into this video, I appreciate it so much. I know that this video is way longer than what I normally make, and we are not even halfway through it yet, so thank you so much for sticking around. Or if you're just skipping through to the interesting parts, that's totally fine too. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to put a quick reminder to please hit the like button if you're enjoying this video, and also subscribe to my channel if you have not already. The last few months I have been posting every other Friday, and I plan to continue doing that as I am able, so I definitely have a lot of videos that I'm planning to have come out over the next few months, and I would appreciate it if you would be able to stick around and see those if you are interested in nature, sketching, painting, any of those things. If you watch watercolor videos, especially plein air or painting outdoors videos, you will have seen Payne's Gray as a recommended essential, absolute must-have for your watercolor kit. And I didn't have any in any of my sets of watercolors, so I bought this little tube. They were on sale at Michael's, and I just use it in a random little mixing bowl like I am here, and I don't have a pan to put it in or anything. But I really am not the biggest fan of this color. It's not a bad color. It's a blue tinted dark gray, and it can be built to be very, very dark, almost black. And it is useful for a few things like mountains, but I definitely would not say that it is an absolute essential. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that just as a little reminder. I know as creatives we often are looking for the next best supply or essential supply that we just have to get. And I think it's good sometimes to be reminded that what is essential for one person's process might not be essential for yours. It might not be beneficial at all for you, and it might be something that you just end up not really liking or using. So don't feel bad if you don't use the same supplies, or a color that someone says is an absolute necessity doesn't really fit as well with your work, because we all create different things and in different ways, and we don't all need the exact same supplies. So that's just something to keep in mind as you are building your painting kit or any art supplies in general, that just because you see it everywhere and that it is really popular doesn't mean it's going to be the best option for you. Just like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these paintings, I feel like I just needed to add a little bit more contrast and color, and that was the case with these mountain paintings. I feel like there just wasn't enough color on them to make them as vibrant and have as much contrast as I hoped for. So I darkened up the mountains using Payne's Gray, and I made them be a little bit more of like a nighttime sort of scene. And then with the sky, I changed it so it was a sunset sort of color theme with a little bit more purple, some orange, and a little bit of pink as well. I know the point of this week was supposed to be to complete half-finished paintings, but I had this one that was just a sketch, and I don't remember what my reference photo for this was, so I decided to just go in and use Payne's Gray as a base layer, because again, I'm trying to like this color more and find more ways to use it that actually makes sense for my work. So I used it as an underpainting, but instead of just painting the entire page, I used slightly different shades by mixing more or less water, and I used it to map out all the different areas of the painting just to try to add more texture to the underpainting and make it a little bit more interesting and see kind of how that turns out. And I actually really enjoyed this, and I had a lot of fun using this color, and I think it worked really well for what I painted over it. And since I didn't have a reference photo for this, I could make the colors whatever I wanted, so I decided to make it a little more muted, almost a rainy feeling sort of scene instead of my usual brighter mountain scenery. And I think this worked really great for that, and this might be something that I do more often, not just with mountains, but I think this would be really great with a scene of like inside the forest or some plants, to really set the mood of like it's a rainy forest, it's a rainy day, and I think it'd be really great for that. So I'm going to try that as well and see how I like that, because I did really enjoy the extra texture that it added underneath my colors and the overall tone that it gave the painting. So I know I said earlier that I'm not a huge fan of this color, but another reminder for us artists: often we have supplies that we get and then we don't like them the first time we try them, and then they just sit abandoned in our work area, And this is just a little reminder, maybe try using those supplies in a different way, in a different order, combine them with different supplies than you've done before, and maybe you'll enjoy them more, because I really was not a fan of Payne's Gray until I used it for this underpainting, and that really made me like it a lot more. It's probably still not going to be the main color featured in my paintings, but for underpaintings with a little bit gloomier, more muted of a mood, I think it'll be a really great color to have and that I'll actually enjoy using quite a bit. This stage of painting, when you are adding in all the dark contrasts and not really blending the colors out too much and letting everything be very dark, is one of my favorite parts, and I really enjoy adding all these details and texture. So I was really enjoying this part and taking a little bit longer on this painting maybe than I had planned, but it was really nice to just be able to spend time painting and finally get this one finished. I don't even know how long this sketch has been sitting here, and most of the paintings that I worked on this week I had half painted, or I thought they were done but then I didn't like the final result, so I just never shared them. But this one was different since I hadn't really worked on it at all, so it was a lot of fun to be able to watch this painting from start to finish while I was sitting here working on it, and to really just enjoy the overall process. And it definitely motivated me to get more of these paintings done as well. At this point, we just had the pile left of papers that I was avoiding, and I couldn't tell if they were done or not, if I wanted to add things, or some of them I had to completely paint. So I went with something easy this day, and I just painted a bookmark. It was really simple. I already had all of the ink done, and all that I had to do was just add in the colors and adjust the background colors a little bit. So that seemed like an easy starting point when I didn't really know what to do, and that definitely helped a little bit. And I got to just start painting and then get some ideas from there on what I wanted to do with some of the other papers. Also, as a side note, while I'm working on these bookmarks, and then I will have 3 or 4 more that I paint in just a minute, if you are interested in any of these are all available. They range from about $2 to $4, and you can get them customized with any sort of lettering that you would like. I have typewriter stamps, I can hand letter, so if there's any of those that you're interested in, just go ahead and comment and let me know. Moving on to this mountain scene, this was another that I got halfway done with and it felt complete, but I didn't like the way that it looked, and obviously I didn't do the sky or finish the road at all, but it was another one that I felt like it was done, but also it clearly wasn't, and I just didn't know what else I wanted to do with it, so I just put it to the side. And when I came back, as I have been doing on most of these, I just added in more contrast, some darker colors, and then I just went and added a lot of details. Here I'm mixing the various greens with some Payne's gray just to darken them up a little bit, and again, trying to see how many ways I can use this color and how many ways I like using it. And it just helped add some depth and dimension to the mountain scenery in the distance and add a little bit more contrast and some extra dark areas for deeper shadows. So definitely play around with your supplies, different ways to combine them. Obviously mixing colors is not anything groundbreaking, but it can still help change a painting. If you're stuck on a painting and you're not really sure what you don't like about it, maybe just try mixing some of the colors a little bit differently, or simple things like that, and sometimes the solution is easier than you might think. This one also felt like it was basically done, so I just picked one of my darkest browns and used it to outline the mountains a little bit to give them some more contrast and a little bit more shape, and that's basically all that I did for this one. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier of sometimes the solution is something very simple, and maybe you had just been looking at the painting for a little bit too long and you needed a break. I wouldn't recommend taking a break like I did that was a couple months long, but maybe that's what you need. This painting was also basically finished, and I didn't really have anything to add to the waves or the sky, so I decided to just go ahead and add a boat out in the distance, I guess a ship technically, and kept it pretty simple. Did it just in black with the outline as though the sun was behind it, and then in a little bit I'll adjust the sky a little bit to give it a little bit more of a sunset look to explain why it's just the silhouette of the ship. And this one was pretty easy to do. I just had to remember to water down the colors a little bit when I painted the sails so they appeared lighter and a little bit transparent almost. And otherwise I just added a little bit of a sunset coloring to the sky and a few darker shadows to the ocean around the ship. As I mentioned earlier, you can add details to paintings by using less water, which is what I did with this very, very tiny painting. And the smaller your painting, the less water you're going to need, obviously, just because you're covering less area. But also, you need to make sure when you're painting something very tiny with watercolor that you pay attention to how much water you're using so you don't make a mess all over and so you can still include details on there. Or on bookmarks like this dog, if you want it to be splattery, obviously you use more water, so when you blow on it you can get that splatter effect and the splash as the water moves around. So there's really not one way to watercolor, obviously. So just kind of work with whatever your subject is and whatever style you're wanting to do. If you want to include a lot of detail, if you want to include a lot of splatter, just adjust your amounts of water accordingly. I am definitely not an expert watercolor artist, and there are so many artists that are much better at watercolor than I am and have amazing tutorial and tip videos, so definitely watch as many videos from as many artists as you can. But I also just wanted to add that I don't usually know exactly what to say when people ask for tips on watercolor, because I feel like a lot of it is really just seeing what feels right for each individual painting and really just working with it instead of maybe trying to make it turn out a certain specific way. It really just is a lot of seeing what feels best for you and for each painting, which I know is really not helpful for giving tips or suggestions. So if you have specific things you would like to know about watercolor, leave comments below, let me know. I am planning on making a few, definitely shorter than this ridiculously long video, a few little videos about watercolor, with each one being about 1, 2, maybe 3 tips at most, just to kind of try to keep them short and just to have a little series where you can go look at those, and if there's something specific that you want to hear about, they'll be in those videos and then in a little playlist, so you can just go quickly rewatch them if there's something that you're interested in hearing about specifically. With this painting, I feel like the leaves that I put on when I originally painted it didn't leave me with very many options, and thinking about it afterwards, I should have painted it where there were more trees in the background like you were in the forest, and kind of adjusted the perspective a little bit, but instead I just added a small flower field and then some more green texture to the background, and I think I add even more later, just to make it feel a little bit more foresty, but I definitely could have done a lot more to make that look like a more complete painting. Same thing with these. I didn't really plan out what I wanted to do with them beforehand, so I got the basic shapes done and then I was like, well, now what do I do? And then I just abandoned it, and there was only so much that I could do to add to it, so I just added texture to the sand and the sky and filled in the rest of the space with the sky, and then just kept adding more texture and details to those cacti. These are the bookmarks I mentioned earlier. I did want to keep them pretty plain because sometimes people like to order them with customized lettering on them, so I tried to just add a little bit more texture and some more contrast, as I've been doing. I feel like that's just what I keep saying for every painting, but adding a little bit more color and then leaving them open, so if people had quotes or anything else that they wanted lettered on them, there would be plenty of space for that, and basically just adding some more color to make them more vibrant and interesting, and that was basically all for these. If you follow me on Instagram, I shared a reel this week with a painting very similar to this one of a little mountain town with shimmers and sparkles on the buildings and in the sky, and I wanted to make another bookmark that was similar but a little bit less detailed because I didn't want to spend too much time, and this gray background seemed like it would be a perfect fit for some mountains under a sparkly night sky, and another opportunity to use some more Payne's gray because it is very nice for really dark mountains. And then I just added in some dark purple with shimmer and a few other shimmery colors into the sky. I think I might end up making a larger painting of shimmery, sparkly nighttime landscapes, maybe some with the ocean, some more with little towns by mountains. I'm thinking of just making a few of those because they were so much fun to make, and when it's a perspective where the town or the city is far away, you don't have to be too careful about how the buildings look. So it was a lot of fun to just really focus more on the overall shape and the colors and not have to worry about all of the details of the buildings. So I think that's something that I will enjoy painting in the next couple of weeks as well. Another supply that I don't use as much and would like to get better at using is gouache, and I've seen a lot of videos of people using this, and I just have not quite gotten the hang of it yet and still struggle to get it to blend and spread as smoothly as I would like. So this time what I'm doing is I put it on this little metal pan that's part of my pencil case, which is now my watercolor holder, and I'm using that as a mixing palette so I can mix more or less water into them as I need and just experiment with different textures and different color combinations as well. And I'm basically just adding some more color to this whale, adjusting the colors a little bit, because when I first painted these gouache pieces, this one's on a canvas, the other two are on paper, I was using a different gouache. It's a cheaper one that I got that just had a few colors in it, and they're not quite as nice as these ones, and they actually ended up drying out and they could not be rehydrated, which if you know about gouache, normally you can rehydrate it, and those ones didn't rehydrate. So I got these ones, which are a little bit higher quality, and I'm just using those to adjust all of the colors, add more details and texture, and all of those things. I do think this gouache mixes with the water a little bit better and it's a bit smoother, but I did still have a hard time getting it to be the exact texture that I was looking for. So I'm going to keep working with this gouache and maybe use it on some paper as well. I do use it on a paper here in a minute, but I'm just not sure that I like the exact texture of it at the moment. So I'm definitely going to keep working with it and see how it feels on other mediums as well. This painting was also started using the other gouache, and as you can tell, it didn't spread very well. There's a lot of dry marks on the page, and I didn't want those to show up, so I just covered over most of the green with a new green, which I actually took just straight from the pot, and then I just added a little extra water so it would spread. I also adjusted the size and shape of the mushroom by using red straight from the pot as well, and then I mixed a few colors to try to get the color that I was looking for the base of the mushroom. And I realized I made the mushroom cap the wrong shape and it wasn't really working out the way that I wanted, so I just doodled in some flowers and leaves and then some trees at the top, and really just kept this super simple and kind of in the same style as when I do children's book illustrations. Obviously it's not the exact same, but sort of similar to that, and really just didn't try to work with this too much, just because I figured I already didn't like it, and if my changes to it aren't making me like it anymore, I didn't want to waste too much time on this one, because really every piece doesn't have to turn out perfectly, and I didn't really have anything in mind to do that would make me like this painting more or enjoy it, so I decided to just leave it like this for now. Up last we have this little geometric toucan, which I actually really like. I just wanted to adjust the colors a little bit. Obviously he was missing his tail, so we needed to add that, some leaves and florals, and also a little tree branch for him to be sitting on so he's not just floating there in space. And overall, I actually think this turned out pretty cute. I think the brighter colors and not trying to do too much shading really worked better for this than when I was trying to do a lot of shading on the whale. So I don't know, maybe I will try doing gouache paintings that have less shading and are more just blocks of each color with very minimal shading. Maybe that will make it a little bit easier for me as I'm starting out with these, and maybe that would be a better approach. If you have tips or suggestions for painting with gouache, please let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear them. Overall, I really enjoyed all of these paintings that I was able to work on. I got quite a few finished, and I am so glad that you guys stopped by to watch this video. I know it's a super long one. If you skipped through it, if you stuck around for the whole thing, either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.